Good afternoon. I'm Scott Silverman, co-founder of CommerceNext. On behalf of my fellow co-founders, Veronica Sonsev and Alan Dick, I'd like to welcome you to the CommerceNext Virtual Summit, and thank you all for joining us. We are a community event series and conference for marketers at retailers and direct-to-consumer brands. The theme for our virtual summit today and tomorrow is Path to Recovery. So as part of that, we'll be hearing from a number of retailers and DTC brands that have pivoted their businesses in one way or another to adjust to the pandemic. CommerceNext has had to do some pivoting as well. In fact, today I was originally planning to be making opening remarks in Midtown Manhattan at the Hilton New York Midtown in front of 1,200 people, actually in person. But instead, we are here bringing you 17 sessions and more than 40 speakers to your PCs and phones. The virtual summit follows 4 months of transitioning for CommerceNext from in-person dinners, conferences, networking events, to everything virtual, ongoing webinars on a weekly basis, research to help our community benchmark their efforts, and new virtual formats like virtual lunch and learns for learning, networking, and information sharing. I'm really fortunate to work with two amazing co-founders who have made what could have easily been a very difficult and painful period into some of the proudest moments of my career, as we have delivered all of this useful information at a time when it's really important for the industry to have information and to learn what's going on. So I'm honored to work with Veronica and Alan. I'm excited about what we've accomplished so far, including today and tomorrow's virtual summit. So I want to give a big thank you to a few different groups. First are our sponsors who have been supporting us and contributing to the thought leadership. And then next, I want to give a big thank you for quite a big team that has been helping us put together the virtual summit. So as they say, it takes a village, and Alan, Veronica, and myself, we could not have made all of this happen without an amazing team of professionals who have been doing amazing work to keep our community going. So thank you all. So a couple announcements that I want to mention of things that are coming up. We have our webinar series that is going to resume on Wednesday, August 12th. And the topic is why 2020 is actually the year of mobile. We will continue with webinars on nearly a weekly basis. And then we have on October 7th, our next virtual summit, which is going to be a half day in the afternoon, looking at the holiday and getting prepared for the holiday. So a little bit about the agenda for today. First, we're doing this live, so apologies for any bumps in the road, but we think that the interactivity that we get with the audience is worth the risk. And throughout the virtual summit, we'll be taking your questions, so feel free to load those up during the presentations, and I'll explain a little bit about how to do that. And to kind of keep things interesting, we'll be asking you some live polls in between the sessions, again, to add to that interactivity. So if you're sharing on social media, our hashtag is #CNVS2020. So CNVS2020, and feel free to tweet out anything interesting that you are hearing. So for the next 2 hours, I'll be your MC. We have 5 straight sessions. We're going to start with a view of the new normal of retail based on some merchant research. Then we're going to move into some consumer research that looks at the post-pandemic consumer. We're going to have a discussion opportunities to use SMS to drive revenue. Then we'll have a panel discussion on marketing and merchandising strategies for recessionary times. And then to take us into our first break, a fireside chat with Gail Tifford, who's the Chief Brand Officer of WW. So a couple housekeeping slides that I wanted to go through here. So don't worry about missing anything. You can download the slides and other handouts now. And we're recording the summit that you'll get a notification when that's available later this week. So And then you can ask your speakers some questions. So let me just walk through a little bit about that. Also, quick reminder, if you want to get text reminders about when sessions are starting, so you can go ahead and do that. Just send a text to, it's blocked on my screen, so we have our first little bump in the road. But hopefully you can read that. I can't see it myself. And then as far as asking questions, there you'll see a little console for attendees with Q&A. If you just go down to the bottom, you can enter your Q&A. And for a lot of these sessions, even after the session ends, the speakers will stick around and we can have them answer some of your questions. So next, our handouts. So we have a number of handouts. So all of the slides you can download as PDFs. A number of our sponsors have included handouts with additional information. Our big annual research report is in there as well. And so there's just a whole bunch of information that are in these different handouts. And then finally, for the polling questions, when you'll do that, if you see that red circle in the bottom, you just look at the closed polls and you can see what the results were. I want to get started with our first session this afternoon. I'd like to ask Sucharita and Peter to begin joining us. I think Sucharita is going to turn her camera on. I'm going to turn mine off. And thanks, Sucharita, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to present. When I think about what is really happening and what does the new normal mean, it really means divergence. And what I'm saying when I point out the word divergence, it is that there will be those that are having bright futures and those that have many, many bleak futures, unfortunately. And that is the case across the entire retail ecosystem, whether we're talking about consumers, retailers, or brands. And I'm going to walk you through what I mean by this concept of a divergence for each of those sectors. First, with consumers, we know that the pandemic has been catastrophic for those that are already the least well off. We know that the unemployment rate has been at historic highs, and that has very, very different implications for different demographic groups. And certainly the minority groups tend to be those with historically have had higher unemployment rates, but even worse through the course of the pandemic. But it's not just the employment rates, it's actually also the impact on health as well. And while a significant part of the attention has gone to younger consumers who the media portrays as going to bars and out publicly, that they've been those with the largest percent of cases, what should also be getting attention, and this is data from where I live in North Carolina, where a significant portion are also being affected who tend to be the same minorities. Just a piece to call out, 43% of Hispanics in the state of North Carolina are among those that are testing positive, whereas Hispanics are only 10% of the entire population. So really some important points that are getting overlooked. We also know that the most vulnerable also tend to be less concerned with issues related to the pandemic. We are seeing that they tend to be less worried that they may actually know somebody who may get sick, or less worried that they themselves may get sick. They're less worried that the government's response is too slow, or that, interestingly, they're on par with concerns around being able to get health care when they need it. On the other hand, we know that the more affluent customers are holding their own, and we see that certainly from an employment standpoint, but also from just an overall stock market and asset ownership standpoint too. Certainly we had a small setback in April with the market, but there's been a relatively significant rebound. And when you look at it historically, it's actually been pretty strong. And then when you're actually looking at the amount of spend across luxury, it is at levels which have almost recovered to pre-COVID levels. If you look at the sales of Porsche, for instance, the sales in in the past month were the same as in February. When you look at the levels of sales that luxury stores like Louis Vuitton have been experiencing, those two are up by double digits year over year, not month over month. And then when we look at one of the biggest ways that consumers are able to purchase luxury, you look at universities, and they're continuing to charge full tuition, even though they have a subpar experience that they're now going to be offering their students. Now, on the retailer side, we also see this divergence. And while at the face of it, the pandemic has had almost no impact, there was the setback in April that took the industry back by about 5 years. When you look and dig deeper, there are, of course, significant variances, and the devil's in the details. We have department stores, which are at decades-level lows, and this has actually been an ongoing downward sloping trend dating back to essentially the turn of the century. And then you have categories like restaurants, which have a similar trajectory to the overall picture, but what's different is that their variances are significantly bigger, so it's not just a 5-year setback, it's more like a 15-year setback in that case as well. And of course, other sectors like apparel and clothing stores also have been adversely affected, and we'll also need to figure out ways to continue to thrive. We have bankruptcies in nearly almost every week. A new retailer is announced to go into Chapter 11, and in some cases Chapter 7 as well. And this is likely to be a story and a trajectory that won't change anytime soon. But at the same time, we know that there will be, at the end of this pandemic, a number of retailers that will be much, much stronger. Grocers have been up in the double digits year over year, 13% for just the first 6 months of the year, which is astounding because this has been a flat, if not negative, category for a number of years. Do-it-yourself stores also up double digits, and alcohol stores up over 20%. And the biggest winner of all, of course, are the online pure plays. And one thing to keep in mind is that the strongest of the retailers are in a position to actually exploit assets that they may not even think they realize they have, in part the eyeballs for solutions like advertising. And basically this chart is what consumers pay attention to of a dozen different advertising formats. What's really interesting is on the right-hand side are all the digital advertising formats, including the ones that most retail marketers tend to lean into, like Facebook and Google. Meanwhile, on the left side of the screen are the media formats that consumers are more likely to pay attention to. And the number one thing on this list that people are most likely to pay attention to are actually ads in physical stores. So when you're wondering what's the value of the Walmart and Target media networks, it's pretty incredible. So the third piece of divergence is really in the brands. And by brands, I mean those consumer-facing branded manufacturers. And on the one hand, we know that marketplaces are going to come out of the pandemic more strong than ever before. The usage of solutions like Amazon and Alibaba are at record highs, and more consumers plan to use those sites even after the pandemic is finished. But what we also know is that marketplaces dilute brands. Nearly 20% of consumers worry that marketplaces have poor quality or they have counterfeit products. And when we look at why do people shop on sites like Amazon, price is the number one reason. And there's a huge delta between the number one and the number two reason that people shop on Amazon, which is convenience. And at the same time, we know that brands are not just rolling over, and an increasingly large number are selling directly to consumer. You have sites like Dyson, which offer a half a dozen reasons to shoppers, telling them why a consumer should actually be purchasing directly from them versus from any of the other purveyors of their goods. And we also know that even for the essential goods merchants and for the essential products categories, sales are growing there too. And in our most recent survey, we found that 10% of consumers are purchasing directly from these websites, in large part because their ability to purchase from some of these larger multi-category sites means that they often don't get the variety of products, or the products are often out of stock these days. So what does all of this mean? And when we talk about divergence for consumers, what is likely to result is, and really the only thing to bridge the level of inequality, is to bring forward something that the Business Roundtable, which is a nonprofit, calls stakeholder primacy. And what that means is businesses built not for shareholders, but for constituents ranging from their customers to their employees to their communities. What that also means is that companies get rewarded finally for nearshoring and bringing manufacturing to the communities where they're actually selling goods. And finally, that means higher wages and more social programs that help to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots. For retailers, we expect divergence to mean that dinosaurs will die and that speed ends up being correlated with survival. So those companies that are able to adapt the fastest, similar to the companies that we saw very, very quickly rolling out solutions like curbside, to be the ones that thrive. The new retailers are going to be the ones who are more nimble. They have asset-light platforms, often with fewer stores and smaller stores. And what we also know is that new business models like advertising in the stores that are left behind becomes really, really compelling. And finally, for brands, we all can expect that retail jobs in the future are going to be on digital teams of brands. Sales organizations will be replaced by what we call e-control, which is the monitoring online of everything from gray market to counterfeit goods. And I expect every brand, regardless of whether it's essential or a high-ticket item, will see at least 10% of its sales coming from direct-to-consumer. This is my contact information if ever anyone wants to chat, and then I'm going to hand it over to Peter.
Thank you, Sucharita. Hopefully you can hear me now, right? So, when I look at what's happening in the market and the response of several companies, it actually reminded me of the Stockdale paradox. And Vice Admiral Stockdale was captured and held a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7.5 years. And during this time, majority of his co-prisoners actually died. And when he was interviewed afterwards, and when he was asked, what are the traits of people that actually didn't make it out? His answer was very clear: the optimists. Those were the people that were expecting to be out by Christmas, and actually Christmas came, and another Christmas came, and actually many of them were dying from expecting to get out too early. So what's the learning from this? It's not about throwing out the faith. You actually have to retain the faith that you will prevail and you will get through, but you have to be able to confront the most brutal facts about your reality. And very often you can see that it's not the case. So we did joint research with CommerceNext, and you can actually download it in the handouts, so you would be able to go through everything there. But when you look at it, what are the two most common barriers to achieving success in e-commerce? Now, you can see that it's securing IT bandwidth and support and managing technology issues. Those are the top two. However, when you look at it and compare digital-first retailers and other retailers, you can see that those do not even make it to the top two for digital-first retailers. And that comes back to what Sucharita said in her presentation, that there will be actually many new winners and many new losers. And many of the current retailers have complex, systems, very old school, and they're not able to move forward. And because of that, the digital-first retailers are able to really get ahead. And actually, when you look at what's the first common issue of both of them, it's actually getting the unified customer view. And one of the things that you can see is that the digital-first are always ahead, and the other retailers are now playing a catch-up, and COVID made it just significantly stronger. Now, customer data platforms were the #1 priority, tech priority for companies pre-COVID. Now, what happened with COVID is it went down slightly, because you can see that there's more thinking about the short term, and you can see that the messaging and SMS platforms became #1. And the reason behind that is that during COVID, companies needed to communicate digitally, and they found out that they need to have more diverse set of channels to be able to reach them. And so they became much more tactical and started thinking short term. Another thing that you can see, as in every crisis, the short-term thinking is visible in here as well, where companies are shifting much more towards performance, although pre-COVID, many of them actually wanted to shift much more towards brand, which is the winning strategy in most of the times. And the most successful companies are investing much more towards brand than towards performance. Another one, very interesting finding for me was that COVID actually made companies be less concerned about privacy and security. And many companies are now claiming that they're investing minimal amount to be compliant. And from our experience, what we see very often when we start working with a brand, we actually find out that they're not at all compliant, not even close. And so it would be very interesting to observe over time how this will be changing. Now, for me, one of the most interesting findings that's coming from this survey, as well as from the research that we've done with our customers, is that companies are now focusing. We're trying to focus much more on acquisition before COVID. So pre-COVID, you can see that especially other retailers, but also quite a few digital-first companies were focusing on acquisition. When you compare it with post-COVID, you can actually see that there's a significant shift towards retention. And the reason behind that is that we've seen companies double, some even quadruple their online sales. However, this growth, only very small part of that growth was coming from the new customers that did not shop with them before. Most of the growth was actually coming from higher share of wallet of existing customers. And so it is about really understanding your customers and finding ways how to serve them digitally in a way that the customer experience is great and they want to shop with you. So what are the key takeaways from this? First is confront even the brutal facts of your reality. There are big changes in the marketplace. Like Arcadia Group, one of our customers, actually is thinking about abolishing completely changing rooms in their stores. So that would be a massive change in the thinking of consumers, and we really need to think about what that means for you. The second thing is mid and to long-term thinking is a big competitive advantage. And it's really, really difficult because many companies are really constantly putting out fires. But many companies are still hoping that COVID will go away and things will go back to normal. And those companies are most likely going to die. And as Sucharita said, speed is very highly correlated with success. And then the third thing is customer retention is key to long-term success. And customer retention starts with really understanding the customer, being able to serve them in a personalized way through their preferred channel and serving them relevant content. So if you can make even the first one or two baby steps in this direction, that's your key to long-term survival. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter, and also to Sucharita for packing a ton of information in the first 20 minutes. So a couple things that I wanted to mention before we go into the next session. First is we have again, I want to point you to the handouts. There's one called Pocket Agenda, and that has all of the information about the agenda if you want to download that and print it out or just have it on your screen. And secondly, there was a number of data points in Peter's slides that came from the most recently released CommerceNext marketing study called The Big Pivot. And there's also a download in the handouts called the CommerceNext Big Pivot. If you want to download that, it's a 30-page overview based on surveying more than 100 retail executives. So thank you again, Peter and Sucharita, for kicking us off this afternoon. Next up on our agenda is Ken Kassar, who is the principal of Kassar Co. Strategy Analytics. And Ken is going to be presenting a number of data looking at what consumers are doing, this idea of the post-pandemic consumer. So Ken, I'd like to bring you up to our virtual stage to get started.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. And thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. I'm going to switch my camera off. The title of today's presentation, The State of the Post-Pandemic Consumer, might imply that the COVID-19 pandemic has passed. Sadly, by post-pandemic, we mean the period after the pandemic began, which obviously we're in the thick of. We're in an unprecedented time when an understanding of the consumer is shaken to her core couldn't be more important. Frustrating, though, to get insights that are fairly clear in this environment. We'll try to do our part to use the next 20 minutes or so of your time to illuminate the consumer in ways that you've not seen. A little bit about us. For those unfamiliar with CommerceNext, we are a strategy and analytic consultancy focusing on bringing alternative sources of data to the retail industry, providing competitive context that goes beyond the internal data that retailers have available to them. We're also announcing the launch today of CommerceNext's first data product, which you'll learn a little bit about ahead. A core tenet at CommerceNext is that no one source of data has a monopoly on the truth. In the spirit of providing a multi-dimensional view of the consumer, we'll present you with a delicious stew with 3 different forms of data. First, CommerceNext partnered with BizRate Insights during the beginning part of July to field a survey of 1,055 Americans, representative of the US population, that we'll use to shed light on consumer attitudes and intents around shopping. We'll also talk a little bit about the Census Bureau data that Sucharita had referred to. Using their advanced monthly trade statistics that are made available each month, about halfway through the following month. That data is considered a fairly definitive source. It certainly moves financial markets, but it tends to present data at a very high level. It's monthly, it's a little delayed, there's no connection to the consumer, geography, online visibility is relatively poor. And so to plug some of those gaps, we're going to use data from what we call the context report, which is CommerceNext's first report in partnership with Affinity Solutions. Affinity Solutions collects data from 90 million credit and debit card holders in the US. At the top line, the data correlates well with census data, but it allows fairly important double clicks on consumer spending. We can see spending at the daily level. We can see online and offline broken out for omni-channel retailers. We can track to demographics, we can track behaviors longitudinally, and we can see data down to the retailer level. All of these slides will be available after, so don't feel like you've got to frantically take screenshots in order to keep up. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation. As Sucharita has pointed out, while the U.S. retail economy has been battered, we are seeing clear signs of recovery. The glass is certainly half empty. Maybe apropos of the moment, the half empty, half full glass may be filled with vodka, but there is good news. We're going to start with a slightly different view of the U.S. Census Bureau data. Here we're looking at retail gas and restaurant/bar sales going back to July 2019. The red line looks at monthly retail sales for the past 12 months. The blue line looks at sales from the same month last year. So it's a year-over-year comparison. One of the tricks with the way the media interprets the Census Bureau data is that they tend to do month-on-month as opposed to year-on-year, which is, I think, more useful for retailers where seasonality is important. The dip in sales that we see during April and May looks somewhat innocuous, but that represents $103 billion in lost sales net, despite the increases that we saw in certain places. But by June 2020, we see that levels of retail sales were virtually flat compared with June 2019. Pretty amazing thing, especially when you consider that unemployment is currently at 11%. Discretionary categories were particularly clobbered. Apparel retail sales, for example, were down an almost unthinkable 86%, and this includes online sales. By June, apparel sales were down 24% relative to the year before, which passes for good news in the apparel space. I believe that the pandemic has at least temporarily breached the mental partitions that used to exist in consumers' minds, separating different categories of discretionary spend, as consumers' discretionary budgets were basically set to zero during COVID lockdowns. It's increasingly about this or that, not this and that. Put another way, retailers are competing with other discretionary pots of money like they never have before. So let's shift to some survey data. Here we're looking at the first slide from that CommerceNext BizRate Insights survey that we had talked about. In this particular question, consumers were asked what activities they missed the most during COVID-driven lockdowns. At the top of the list, cited by 49% of respondents, dining out. Surprise to me. Shopping for fun is on the list, and by fun we mean for non-discretionary items. That came up number 7 on the list, cited by 17% of respondents. Women were more likely than men, 21% versus 9%, to have responded shopping for fun. But if our theory that discretionary budgets have become unpartitioned, this ought to be a concern for retailers, particularly those that have been forced to cut back on marketing spend with increasingly tight budgets. Moving to better news, in this question of the survey, respondents were asked which type of goods do you have plans to buy but have delayed purchasing because it's been difficult to shop during the pandemic. Obviously, we're trying to get at pent-up demand here. Given the poor apparel sales that we saw between April and June, it's not surprising that apparel tops the list in terms of pent-up demand, more for women than men. It's interesting that we still see some pent-up demand in home categories, despite the fact that they performed well during COVID. Health and beauty is number 3 on the list, particularly amongst women. We suspect that this is principally within beauty, which has suffered just about as badly as apparel. Looking ahead, we ask consumers about their plans to spend during the critical upcoming back to school and holiday seasons. Consumers are evenly divided. 48% of people said that they plan to spend the same as last year. 47% of people say that they plan to spend less. Few say that they plan to spend more. If we peel back the onion, here we're looking at those same survey responses for different income groups. Less than 50,000 in annual household income, 50 to 100,000, and 100 plus. And what we see here is that households with less than 50,000 in annual household income are probably, not surprisingly, more likely to plan to cut back than those with more than $100,000 in income. But we see that affluent households plan to be only a little bit less frugal than everybody else. While back to school is here, and I think consumer sentiment right now is probably a decent read on back to school. Holiday is pretty far away, and I would probably take some of this with a bit of a grain of salt. Speaking of economic intent, some of you may recognize John Maynard Keynes, the economist credited with the idea that government stimulatory spending is necessary in times of economic duress. He sort of provided the intellectual underpinning for the New Deal during the Great Depression. Let's see how spending is held up during COVID and how well Keynesian economics have held up. Now we're going to take our first look at that credit card data set from Affinity Solutions that I had told you about. What we're doing here is comparing spend for each week during COVID against the same week last year by income group for those same less than 50, 50 to 100, 100 or more, February through April. We can see that before COVID hit, we were in a very strong position amongst all income cohorts, between 5 and 8% up relative to the previous year. Then we can see some stockpiling, which bumped spending up briefly before we saw kind of a free fall in consumer spending. We'll call the last week in February normal. And then those weeks at the end of March, beginning of April, the pits of despair. As we might expect, spending decreased amongst all groups when we compare normal to the pits of despair, but spending declined less, 4 points less, in fact, among less affluent households, because more affluent households tend to have larger discretionary budgets. And discretionary spending was obviously hit very hard by COVID. When we look ahead and expand this analysis through the end of June, and we overlay the timing of stimulus payments, the story gets pretty interesting. The sharp increase in consumer spending that we saw suggests pretty strongly that the stimulus money made a big difference. The Keynesians among you are undoubtedly cheering. We can also see that, as designed, the spring stimulus particularly benefited the less affluent, whose spending increased by 22% compared to just 15% for those 100,000 and more in income. The dip that we see at the last week of this period toward the end of June may be attributable to the July 4th holiday and the calendar. It may also be attributable to growing concern about the rise of COVID in regions that had been relatively free of it before. Obviously, we're all watching pretty closely to see what comes out of Washington, D.C. in the days ahead. The rest of the world seems to be a bit of ahead of us in terms of stimulus. Chinese economy is rebounding, and we've got a sort of fairly significant differences between Democrats and Republicans that we hope will be resolved relatively shortly. Next, we're going to change gear and look at the online story. And we'll start by going back to the census data. Remember, red line is this year, blue line is the same month last year. When the June census data dropped a few weeks ago, there was a lot of attention in the media given to the fact that non-store retail sales had declined slightly. This was technically true, but very misleading for a few reasons. This obscures the fact that non-store retailers' share of total retail sales actually increased from 23% of retail sales to 30% from May to June. And it also doesn't include omni-channel retailers. So there are some important parts of the story that we're missing. In order to get at those missing parts of the story, we're going to dive into our credit card data set. In order to really understand the impact of online sales, we need to be able to look at online-only retailers as well as omnichannel. In this chart, we're looking at the online share of total retail sales by week, and we're excluding restaurant and gas. The COVID spike, which was circled in red, almost rivaled levels from holiday 2019, accounting for 28% of retail spending at its peak. I do want to note that this includes grocery, which is a huge number relative to the rest of the retail picture, where online penetration rates are still low, but much higher during this particular period. We also see online penetration rates coming back down to earth, kind of on the right-hand side of this chart, bumping up around the 25% neighborhood. However, many online buyers experience less than optimal shopping experiences during the COVID lockdown, suffering out of stocks, long delivery waits, site outages. And so the big question is whether those experiences have cast online in a poor light, potentially suppressing future e-commerce opportunity. To answer that, we'll come back to our CommerceNext Biz Rate survey. Of everyone surveyed, 50% of the people told us that they had been compelled to buy more online because of COVID and the store shutdowns that came with COVID. Among that group of people, 53% said that their online shopping experiences during COVID had not changed their opinions about e-commerce. 38% walked away with more positive views on e-commerce. Only 9% were more negative. We do believe that this data, combined with the continued strength that we're seeing in online sales, suggests that consumers have largely forgiven some of the COVID trip-ups that we saw. Now we're going to double click on those digital shopping experiences. In the survey, consumers were asked about shopping related things that they were compelled to try out during COVID lockdowns for the first time. 43% of respondents told us that they had tried curbside pickup for the first time. We do believe that curbside, as opposed to in-store pickup of online orders, well, I'll just leave the camera on. The curbside, as opposed to in-store pickup, is going to become a minimal expectation on behalf of consumers. Retailers in the past had always tried to force consumers into the store to pick up their online orders with the hopes that they would buy something else. We really believe that the door is closing on that opportunity. Retailers that want consumers to go into the store are going to have to provide them with some incentive to do so. 23% of the consumers that we surveyed tried a new delivery vendor, Instacart or DoorDash, for example. If we go way down the list, we can see that 13% of consumers said that they used mobile devices to pay in store for the first time. Not quite sure what to make of this number. I might have guessed that it would have been higher, but we might not have seen the breakout that some might have expected. The last thing that we want to do is go micro. We love macroeconomics, but we're very interested in microeconomic stories where there are winners, losers, and lessons for everybody. As we'll see, there is evidence that COVID has significantly altered the competitive retail environment in ways that may well outlive the virus. And this is the premise, really, of Casarco's first data product, the Context Report: Retail, which provides retailers with an understanding of the landscape around them. The final handful of slides that I'll show you will reveal some of the competitive insights. I think a pretty interesting story that can be gleaned, all with data that's available to retailers now. The microeconomic story that we're going to focuses on three value-oriented family apparel retailers: Kohl's, JCPenney, and Old Navy. Each of these guys was impacted by COVID as profoundly as any other retailer in the apparel sector. And if we track total sales for the aggregate of these three retailers, that's online and offline, February through the end of June, we can see that as consumers were beginning to gear up for spring, COVID hit, taking 79% of sales out of the mix for these retailers in a matter of 3 weeks. But then we see that sales start to rebuild in May as stores are reopening, leading to a mid-June peak that actually, believe it or not, was higher than levels in the pre-COVID era. Now we're going to bring online into the picture. So the blue bars represent the data we were just looking at, total online sales. The red line represents the online share of retail sales for the three in aggregate. We can see that retail sales didn't entirely disappear for these retailers during the pits of despair, thanks to e-commerce, which accounted for virtually 100% of sales during mid-March through mid-May. But let's now hone in on JCPenney in particular. Looking at their online sales by week. If we're jcpenney.com, we might be reasonably happy. Average weekly sales during the pits of despair were actually up 9% from the pre-period. And then the sales in the period after that were actually up 16% from the period prior. So things are looking okay given the pandemic until we overlay some competitive context. When we do that, we can see that Kohl's and Old Navy's online sales skyrocketed during COVID. We can see that JCPenney lost significant ground to its competitive set, who both saw dramatically more significant increases in online sales. It's pretty clear with this perspective that JCPenney missed a pretty significant opportunity. It might have been because of reduced marketing spending. It might have been because of limits on e-commerce capacity. It could have been driven by their consumer base, whatever it was, or it may have been a combination of other things. But the net effect of all that was that JCPenney's share in the pre-COVID period dropped from 34% amongst these three retailers to 23%. That's an 11-point drop. But the thing that's even more distressing for JCPenney is the fact that this share loss persisted into the late stage. When the category was rebounding both online and in store, JCPenney was left behind. Their share that had dropped to 23% during the peak has not rebounded. This is obviously particularly bad news as JCPenney announces plans to close 150 or so stores. I think kind of the key point that I want to quickly make here is just think about how differently each of these companies would have reacted had they the benefit of all that situational awareness. So now I hope that everybody's enjoyed our little mathematical spin through the U.S. retail economy, and let's close with some high points. First, all things considered, there's cause for retailers to be optimistic, and by optimistic, we specifically mean invest in marketing, invest in online. The fiscal stimulus that occurred during the spring clearly pulled the U.S. economy out of freefall. You might want to call your congressperson to encourage them to get moving. Online penetration is coming down. We don't believe that it's going to come down to pre-COVID levels. Investments in online, again, are critical. Finally, COVID has fundamentally reshuffled the competitive deck for retailers, and we think it's more important than ever that retailers have competitive visibility. Slides will be available from CommerceNext for all attendees. For anyone that wants the unabridged deck with all of the outtakes, the director's cut, just visit kasarcode.com/getthedeck, and we'll be able to get that unabridged deck over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ken. And it was great to have both Ken Yu and Sucharita and Peter kind of kick off with this big picture of what we're seeing with e-commerce and the economy. We are now going to kind of get a little more focused into a few different areas. To kind of, I'm going to skip our housekeeping because I think a lot of folks have been with us from the beginning, or I'll skip real quickly through it about Q&A and where to do that, and then get to our live poll question, which is, I'm going to launch it now. And this is really focused on the next topic, which is going to be focusing on SMS. So if my slides will advance here. So what best describes how you have interacted with a retailer using SMS? I've never done it. I've tried it once or twice. I do it when there's a problem and it's offered, or I do it all the time. And the winner is I've tried it once or twice. Next is I've never done this. So there's a lot of folks that are still sitting on the sidelines. And we're going to hear from Elizabeth Ray at Attentive and Philip Cruikshank from CB2 about all the consumers that are not on the sidelines and are actively using SMS. So Elizabeth, do you want to pick it up from here?
My name is Elizabeth Ray. I'm VP of Client Strategy at Attentive, and I'm very pleased to be joined by one of our favorite clients, that is Philip Cruikshank, Brand Marketing Manager at the contemporary home decor and furniture brand CB2. So what will we cover in our 15 minutes together? We'll first look back at the 2019 holiday shopping season and the impact that mobile had. We'll also talk about the challenges faced by retail and e-commerce marketers when trying to engage holiday shoppers. And I'll wrap up with why text messaging is an effective way to drive revenue, especially during the holiday season. But of course, really why we are here, we have an incredible marketer, Philip from CB2, who will share his team's experience over the past 2 holiday seasons. And spoiler alert, they drove over 150 times ROI from text messaging alone, along with some tips for how CB2 is thinking about this year's peak season. And if time permits, we will certainly open up for Q&A. So next slide. So first, a little about Attentive. Close to 4 years ago, we created a personalized mobile messaging platform, allowing really the world's most innovative brands to quickly build their SMS subscriber base, deploy personalized messages, and effortlessly track revenue and ROI. Fast forward to today, to 2020, we are 350 some strong, and I'm proud to say that our over 1,000 brands that do include best-in-class marketers do rely on Attentive and text messaging as one of their top performing channels. Fun fact, if you are subscribed for text for this very event, they are also powered by us, so check that out. And we do have significant backing by Sequoia, Bain Capital, IVP, among others. And in April, Sequoia extended our 110 million Series C based on the continued brand and really rapid adoption of this channel. Next slide. So let's take a quick look back at last year's peak season. Over the entire 2019 holiday season, smartphones drove over $50 billion in sales. And of that, online sales driven by smartphones grew 37% year over year compared to 2018. Overall sales, so from desktop and mobile during the holiday season, grew by 16.4 billion, with smartphones driving the majority of that, or really 84% of that growth. And when looking, specifically at the two largest historical shopping days in the U.S., which of course we know are Black Friday and Cyber Monday, smartphones drove $4 of every $10 spent, resulting in just shy of $3 billion in mobile sales on Black Friday and $3 billion of mobile sales on Cyber Monday. Great, next slide. So we, as we plan for this year, what are some of the considerations? These are familiar. So first, increased competition. Retail and e-commerce brands will compete in many of the same channels, digitally and in store. When it comes to email specifically, and I do come from an email marketing background, peak planning honestly started already, if not earlier, in July, because, competition and standing out in a crowded inbox becomes harder and harder every holiday season. Of course, paid media costs spike during this time. More competition and bids for ads only drives prices up, making it even more difficult and expensive to be seen. And of course, there are varying consumer behaviors during the holiday season compared to the rest of the year. So seemingly overnight, consumers become speed shoppers, deal hunters, cart abandoners. They really know that every brand is bound to have some sort of holiday promotion. They will do their research and they will find that best deal. Slide. The 2020 holidays, of course, are expected to be different than any year before, anything we've ever seen, as we consider the events that have happened so far, like COVID-19. And we do need to consider how consumer behavior may have shifted due to that. Consumers may not be as eager to participate in in-store holiday rush. And we have learned that many have become much, much more comfortable shopping online, as brands have made it very easy to do so in response to stay-at-home directives, of course, safety and store closures. Next slide. And as the pandemic has caused, marketers to scale back on their previous priorities pre-pandemic, there definitely are some exceptions. So according to our great host, CommerceNext, who conducted a post-COVID survey in June, SMS is the only emerging technology marketers indicated they plan to increase investment in. And really, this is as more consumers want to hear from brands via text messaging. And as e-commerce continues to take hold, it does make sense that retailers and even the more traditional ones are reprioritizing resources online to make up for what's really lost in declining store traffic. On the next slide. But on the plus side, so consumers are spending more time shopping on mobile devices than usual during the season. So as email inboxes will undoubtedly be inundated with brand communication, digital advertising, like we said, will be more competitive and in turn more expensive. Personalized text messaging truly stands out. So it presents an opportunity, an unsaturated direct channel to reach consumers. And of course, better yet, it is where your consumers already are spending their time, again, on their mobile devices. Next slide. And the performance numbers really are the evidence, if needed, that if you're not already, it is a good idea to focus. Mobile messaging can deliver real-time and sensitive, relevant offers, which do result in 10 times more revenue than email per message, with 99% open rates, upwards of 30% click-through rates, and 25 times ROI. So these numbers are tremendous and they speak for themselves. And next slide. I will say, though, you would rather hear this from someone who has that firsthand brand experience with text messaging. Philip Cruikshank, brand marketing manager at CB2, has partnered with us as Attentive over the past 2 peak seasons to engage holiday shoppers. And he's here to talk about their holiday campaigns, as well as how they plan to beat their prior successes. So take it away, Philip.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. Coming to you live from the CB2 headquarters, actually, in Chicago. It's my first day back in the office today. So it's exciting to be at a desk. CB2, for those of you who don't know, we're part of the Crate and Barrel Holdings family of brands, along with Hudson Grace and Crate and Kids. A lot of people kind of know us as the younger sibling of Crate and Barrel, but we're a city-minded home brand that has a signature creative edge, high design aesthetic, and all for a lot less than you might think. A little bit about what I wanted to cover today, and I guess sharing a little bit about our SMS journey. We've been with Attentive now. This will be our 3rd holiday season working with the team at Attentive. So we signed on with Attentive back in October 2018. 2018 was our first holiday season. And so today, just wanted to share with you some of the evolving SMS strategy tactics that we've developed over the years, and what we learned in 2018 that we then carried into 2019 to grow the channel, and then what we're looking at doing ahead in 2020, both from a customer acquisition as well as a retention standpoint. So how are we continuing to build our SMS audience while keeping the people that are already in there engaged, knowing that it is such a direct channel that's going straight into people's smartphones and text messages. Okay, so the first area is our acquisition. So this is what you're looking at here is one of our 2 acquisition offers that we have live on cb2.com desktop and mobile. This here is a sweepstakes, so it's basically sign up to win a shopping spree. So we announce a winner every month and do that. We actually have another acquisition tactic, which is a 15% off all full price purchases. But we only pulse that one out throughout the year at certain times. So around the holiday season, where we do have so many other promos going on, we default to this acquisition tactic rather than the 15% off, because most people are going to convert on a better deal online anyway. The other thing you'll note here is we actually did a lot of back and forth and testing, and this channel has, as you'll see as we kind of go through, it's all been about test and learn and evolve. And it's a channel that you can do that pretty agile with. Like, you can be pretty quick and sort of like what you want to test and get that out to market pretty quick, a lot quicker than channels like email or paid digital, where there's a lot of production work in the upfront. The Attentive UI kind of makes it very easy to test and put things out. So what we also do is we capture email at this point as well. So we're using SMS as a driver to build our email file size as well. And there's kind of an art and science about how we manage customers who are enrolled in email and SMS, what sort of campaigns they receive. But this is a great tool for us to get build our customer database across both of those channels. Another way we do it is leveraging other owned channels like organic social. So we have, over 600,000 plus organic social followers, and that's growing rapidly, especially during COVID, as I'm sure a lot of brands have seen due to that increased periods of digital consumption and online activity. So we have sort of like, we use this exclusive offers. So we decided that we would do exclusive offers on the SMS channel, not only to continue driving engagement and revenue from our most loyal customers there, but also to use it as a sign-up tool. So we use it on organic social as like, hey, join SMS and you'll get exclusive offers through that channel. Looking specifically at holiday, these texts are just kind of like some examples of where we were in 2018, where we went to in 2019, and then afterwards I'll talk about 2020. But where we started off in 2018, on the far right there, you'll see kind of like we had this static discount, which was 15% off of full price items. As part of a higher promo strategy across the business, last year we moved into, you'll see this shop more, save more. So we went into sort of more tiered discounts, which was really successful for us. And then we also saw in 2018 that there is obviously, when you have such an aggressive sale period, you're pulling up a lot of sales and you experience a bit of a retail hangover in the month that follows. So we sort of introduced this clearance promo strategy that we do. So we send SMSs after the big Black Friday, Cyber Monday kind of holiday sale weekends. We now kind of follow up after that with some clearance messaging. And then you'll see that there on the left there, that's sort of like up to 65% off clearance. And then in the center there, you'll see the pre-sale for 2018 and free shipping on the right. I think one of the biggest takeaways about the types of deals and the cadence that we had in 2018 versus 2019, and which was, I think one of the biggest learnings for us was being new to SMS as a channel. We were very cautious about how many people we were sending SMSs to from a cost management perspective, but also the frequency in which we were sending messages to those people, so that we could keep a really close eye on opt-out rates and make sure that we're obviously not going to hurt the growth of that channel. So our first year, we were very cautious, and we kind of only did a couple of messages over the holiday period. And what we learned is our opt-out rates stayed significantly low, much lower than our goal. So in 2019, we looked at actually doing sort of like a pre-holiday sale with some text messages, as well as the clearance ones that I was talking about. And we saw a huge success from doing that, which you'll kind of see in the results a little bit later. But that's definitely something that we thought if we text people more, that people were going to sort of, get disgruntled or want to opt out. But that wasn't the case at all. It was kind of like the more breadth of offers that we could give this audience across a longer period of time, we were definitely seeing those click-through rates and conversion rates stay above benchmark for us. So that's something we definitely carry forward as we continue to evolve. The other area is automated messages. Automated messages. So this is our bounty card reminder. So this is huge around the holidays. When you see such peak levels in online browsing and everything through cb2.com, our bounty card message is actually one of our strongest performing triggered messages across email and SMS. So this one, actually, we consistently see a conversion rate of over 30% specifically from our abandoned cart and abandoned browse text messages. So a really strong tactic for us around the holidays. And then all of that is to say that what we tested and tried, learned. So in 2018, we had a 126 ROI. In 2019, ROI has become a very key measure for us on the SMS channel, because when you start out, it's very easy to kind of blast everyone with your offers and just kind of broadcast things. But as we kind of evolve, you'll see that you can't, as the file gets bigger and bigger, it becomes very expensive. So you need to be a lot more strategic about who you're sending the messages to. So you'll see in 2019 that we were able to increase our revenue from this channel up 100%, and also increasing our ROI up 21%. Okay, so what we learned from our text messaging channel, as Elizabeth mentioned, SMS subscribers are extremely engaged. Across other channels, we continue to see really strong click-through rates and conversion rates from SMS. And the biggest key takeaway is the conversion rates are actually significantly high because we feel it's a more qualified user that's kind of willing to get an SMS from a brand in their messages app and are going to go to their website. They're obviously a lot more interested and more qualified to buy. The SMS is an effective tool outside of the holidays too. So SMS has become kind of like a lever that we will pull. Obviously, retail, and especially over the past few months, is very uncertain about, we're all trying to comp last year and trying to get a measure on what the retail climate is, SMS has been a really great tool for us. Again, it's something that we could sit in a room today and develop an offer, and it could be live tomorrow to a select audience. So SMS is kind of like, outside of the holidays, a very integral part of our business when we need to quickly turn levers. And test to learn what works. As I said earlier, the Attentive platform has a lot of features that people can kind of, if you're a little bit nerdy about learning more about SMS, and it's an exciting channel with all of the functionality within there to be able to look at segments. You can look at customer data, and kind of like you can test on small audiences. So it does really become a bit of a testing ground for us for other parts of the business. So if we want to test how a promo perhaps will work on a larger scale across the business, we will sometimes start with doing that with a focus group of SMS customers.
I kind of love that. The immediacy of the channel just has that kind of compounding effect across your marketing strategy. And we certainly have seen this, of course, from CB2, but from others who leverage it to do that test and learn and then apply strategies elsewhere.
Yeah, it's kind of good. Yeah, it's good. It's when you're in sort of like those promo meetings and things, if something's going wrong, everyone kind of looks to the SMS people. Okay, so how we're preparing for this year. So as I said a little bit earlier, more personalized messaging to customers. So we're going to leverage Attentive's platform to be able to use customer browse and purchase data, as well as sort of like locations where store markets are and things like that, to build customer segments so that we're sending the right messages to the people that are most likely to convert on certain offers. And we're also going to have a much richer offer strategy this year as well, that we're in the development process of now and just finalizing. Supporting store sales through mobile messaging. So this is a really big thing for us now, as I'm sure every retailer is facing, is kind of like how, while CB2, a large proportion of our revenue has always been online, we do have 18 plus stores in the US. So it's like, how do we start to get shoppers to be able to connect with the store again, experience a new level of service through safer environmental practices around the store. So we'll use SMS as a way to target people within 15 miles of the store, for example, and let them know the different services they can do in a post-COVID world. And lastly, exclusive offers, continuing to do exclusive offers and leveraging the new abandoned browse feature. So I know that was a lot of information. With that all said, I'll hand it back to Elizabeth.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We are incredibly proud of this partnership and certainly look forward to an exciting 2020 holiday season with you. So if those of you, if you didn't take notes, that's okay. We have some tips. We will certainly share this afterwards. And anyone new to mobile messaging, we did just want to leave you with a checklist and tips to make this holiday season successful. First and foremost, start planning early. Honestly, now is probably a good time. Partner with an expert to launch your own text messaging channel, so you can rely on Attentive's, robust list growth tools to quickly grow your subscriber base. And that includes, as Philip walked us through, some mobile and desktop sign-up units, text to join signage that can be placed in store, and of course, Instagram swipe up. So we truly have flexible tools to engage your shoppers where they actually spend their time. And then with this new audience, you will build out a mobile strategy, so messaging strategy, similar to Philip walked you through. So that can include promotions, product release alerts, and also, of course, automated behavioral triggers, like browse abandon, cart abandon. And my team, the very talented client strategy team, will partner with you to execute for the most effective strategy. You will create a holiday calendar, so coordinate a holistic cross-channel communication strategy, and of course, it will help you stay on track. And finally, as Philip definitely talked about, you'll be able to measure your performance with our real-time analytics dashboard that provides campaign analytics like engagement and revenue metrics, and you can also sync your performance data with other marketing analytics platforms. So as you do this, you will iterate season to season, holiday over holiday, and to continue to improve performance year over year like CB2 has. Awesome. So I think next slide, we probably don't have time for questions, and we do very much appreciate the audience, again, for your flexibility. if you would like to learn more, take out your smartphone, open the camera app, and scan this QR code so you can book a demo, meet with us, and of course you have a chance to win a $25 CB2 gift card. I would love to. I'm not eligible, but I definitely encourage all of you to do so. Thank you.
Going to have a Q&A with Gail Tifford, who is the Chief Brand Officer of WW, formerly Weight Watchers, and she's being interviewed by Stacy Widlitz, President, SW Retail Advisors.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Stacy Widlitz, founder and president of SW Retail Advisor and co-founder of Deal Make Hers. And I'm thrilled to be here today to have a chat with Gail Tifford, Chief Brand Officer of WW, formerly Weight Watchers. And, you know, Gail, I'd love for you just to kind of tell us a little bit about your background and specifically your role at WW.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. And so I'm the Chief Brand Officer at WW. I have been here a little over 2 years after spending 21 years at Unilever. So in my role at WW, I oversee everything from the global brand positioning to creative content, e-commerce, consumer products, and member and growth marketing.
Great. So you were instrumental in, about 2 years ago, there was a big change, the role of rebranding from what was formerly Weight Watchers to WW. Can you talk a little bit about that transition? It was seen as like a huge risk then, and obviously turned out to be quite successful. So would love to hear a little bit about that thought process.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. I think externally people maybe thought it was riskier than we did because we had really been listening to our community, and it was something that just felt so natural. And you know, we knew that that our brand was iconic and really rooted in heritage, but we knew that we had to evolve in order to stay relevant. And you know, people weren't just talking about weight, and in fact, our community, it was really all about a holistic approach to wellness. So, of course, you know, we needed to start with our visual identity and going from Weight Watchers to WW, and all of that entailed, which was just a massive undertaking from logo to color palette. I mean, in the US, I think we had 14 different logos alone.
Wow.
So it was really a massive undertaking from website to app to marketing materials in 12 countries around the world. But the second thing, we had, we had created our vision and our mission, which is all around inspiring healthy habits for real life, for people, for families, for communities, for the world. And we created a purpose filter. And everything that we did, and still to this day, we put through our purpose filter. And what was interesting is that there were certain parts of the business that when we put them through that business, that purpose filter, it really identified where there was a lot of work for us to do. So just one example, we have a small consumer products business, but when we put it through the purpose filter, we actually saw that a lot of those products, the foods had artificials in them. And we said, well, this is actually not really in line with what we're trying to do. So within 8 months, we had relaunched our entire consumer products business to take out artificial colors, preservatives, ingredients. So it just, it was really a massive undertaking. And now we're really excited about the path forward. There's still work to do, but we are definitely on the right track.
It's interesting. So you kind of took a holistic approach to wellness rather than just focusing on weight and the scale. And in doing so, you built a different kind of community. And of course, the topic today is a digital community. Yeah. So I'm curious for brands who struggle with how to build a community, you know, overnight. It's like, okay, you're emerging brand. How do you get that personal connection? Can you do that without a purpose? Can you talk a little bit about that, of how to start out building a community?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was very fortunate to come to a brand that had been building community since 1957, and you know, that was really what this was about. And it's interesting because I think, back in the day when we would talk about community, it was very much your neighbor, right? Your community was defined by sort of your physical location. And when the world started to change and really move to a digital world, this company, I think, saw that happening, and in their app, we had created a community, a platform for people to come together, and that's called Connect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, look, I think the community is definitely a buzzword out there. I think when you are creating a community, it's now about coming together where people have shared beliefs about what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. And for us, that's people who are trying to transform their lives and transform the lives of other people. So that's sort of our rallying cry, so that people can be the best that they can be. And what's interesting is that with the shift to digital, these are people who, they look very different. There are men, there are women. We have, all different types of ethnicities, all different types of backgrounds, but people share the same core belief that they think they can really make their lives better. And so it's interesting when you think about the role of community now. What is that one or two things that really rallies your consumers? It's hard to fake that. And so when I think about linking that to purpose, I like to think actually we are one of the very first purpose-driven brands. Mm-hmm. And the brand is literally changing lives, millions of lives every year. I think that if you are going to create that community, having that sense of purpose is really, really important. But I also think it's a business imperative. When you look at the younger generations, I mean, before they even buy a product, they're actually going online to look at what their impact is. And
I
think
in there, yeah.
Totally. And so it goes from, we've moved from marketing to consumers to mattering to people. Mm-hmm. And it's not enough just to, in my mind, transform the lives or help the lives of the people buying your product. But I believe that consumers are also looking for what's the greater impact that you're looking to have on society.
Mm-hmm. And everybody having a common goal creates that community. And it's very interesting because so many brands feel the need to just hire influencers and say, hey, if we just get the word out, it'll automatically happen, and it's not authentic. But you go a bit of a different direction and use advocates. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think, first of all, our product, our brand is a commitment. It's a lifestyle. So it's not like, oh, you go use shampoo and you say, use this, right? Which, by the way, I think people are really starting to see through that. So I think, what we've seen is that the people who come into our brand and commit to it, it does change their lives. And so they're able to speak to it authentically, which I think is so important, because if they're not on the program, people know that. It's so easy now to say, well, is she doing this just, is she hawking product?
Right.
Or is it actually changing her life? And
or does she just look that good normally? Yeah.
Exactly. And, it's just, and people see through it. And I think it's really dangerous. So we definitely call them advocates, because when your life has been changed, you want to go and change other people's lives. And that truth kind of comes through. So I think it's really important. Look, it's okay to hire people to talk about your product and build awareness, but I would be pretty sure that they actually love your product and it's really making a difference to them.
Right. And they have to have that authentic connection.
Yeah. And we've gotten into conversations with people about the product, who they want to come on board and they want to speak to it. And when the first question is about money, we're like, we know this isn't actually the right thing.
When you lead with the dollar signs, that's not the authentic person
exactly
you're looking for. So much has happened in the past few months, obviously with COVID and shutdown, and you guys were able to take a business that was 25% in person and just flip it on its head in 6 days with something like a 97% positive rating. Can you talk about what that process was like? Because I think your brand did it so quickly and so seamlessly, and people want to hear, what they should be doing.
Yeah. So, I think first and foremost, and this goes back to, your purpose, and ours about inspiring healthy habits for real life. Our first concern when COVID hit was, oh my God, we've got to make sure that our employees and our members are safe. And as you mentioned, a big part of our business was in real life workshops, people going to these workshops day in and day out. And so our first thought was protecting our people. And obviously there are financial ramifications that come with it, but we felt like it was really important to do the right thing. And so we shut down all of our studios around the world. And at that point, though, we said, well, wait a minute, we have millions of people who rely on us for this connection, for this check-in, every week. So what we did was as I mentioned, we had our Connect platform, which I say besides Disney is the second most positive place on earth, where we had our community. So we had this platform. And what we did was within 6 days, we had created virtual workshops for all of our members who had been going to the in real life experiences. And this was a massive undertaking. We had to train thousands of coaches because, when you're having a real life experience, it's very different to doing this and being in a, technology.
Right. It's not just about getting the consumer on board. It's about teaching people how to connect digitally. That's a whole different ballgame, especially when you're talking about something so personal as a one-on-one health consultation, really.
Exactly. So we had there was sort of three parts to it. One was getting the technology kind of up and running. And I think the really important decision we made there was we weren't going to try and invent it on our own. So we had the platform, but we didn't have the ability to do video conference. So we partnered with Zoom, and that was really, because I think a lot of tendency is we have to create it here. We have to, if it's not,
it has to be here. Ours. It has to be. We have to own it, and sometimes it's better just to go for it and be quick.
Exactly. So we made the decision that it was better to be quick, and speed was way more important than it being perfect. So that was sort of the technology, the tech teams, the engineering teams. I mean, they were all maniacally focused on this. The second thing was training our coaches. To your point, like, how do you go from being in real life to now being able to manage hundreds of people on a Zoom call? And then the third piece was our members. I mean, there were some members who had never even been on Zoom before. So how, you get that up and running. So that meant working with our member marketing team and our, ECRM team. And how do we explain to people, our customer service team, so that when they got phone calls, this isn't working. So I think if I think about kind of my career, it's probably one of the things I'm the most proud of, working with this team, that they just care so much about the business and care so much about the members.
And that goes back to being everybody having a common purpose and connection, because so many people that work for the company have a personal connection with WW and their background. So it makes everybody, I guess, want to chase the same goal in the best way possible. And, it was interesting. So we talked a little bit about something you did is open up to the community to allow people to attend free town halls. And something about the organization that's always struck me is it's always about doing the right thing as a part of creating that community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things you did?
Yeah. So what we had done, I mean, interestingly enough, we had launched a 9-city tour with Oprah. And that went from January to March. And it was called Oprah's Your Life in Focus 2020 Vision.
We've all seen those pep rallies. They're amazing.
It was really amazing. And then the last one, we were in Denver the first week of March. That was the last one. I mean, thank God.
Yeah.
And we got home, and then COVID hit. And so what we were trying to figure out is, how do we take what we had done in real life experiences? I mean, there were 16,000 people in these arenas, and how do we bring it, online in the virtual world? And at that point, we also made the decision, whereas during the tour we had charged tickets, what we decided is, gosh, I mean, looking at what was happening, now was the time to actually open this up to everybody, because we're all looking for ways to keep ourselves sane, to keep ourselves active, to keep ourselves eating properly. And so, so we opened it up to the public. We had hundreds of thousands of people join us. It was 4 Saturdays in a row. And it was pretty amazing, the amount of people from all over the world. You can still find the videos on YouTube. But that was another, again, a big decision that we said, what's the right thing to do? We could have sold tickets really easily. But that's that at the core, like that's just not. And I feel really grateful to work for a company like that and to have a CEO who keeps us on that path. And so I know it's not the easy thing, but what I will say, and I'm a big believer in karma, is that when you do the right thing, it really comes back to you.
And as a public company, not all public companies have, I guess, the nerve to actually do the right thing rather than go for the bottom line. It's interesting. So you and I talked a little bit about lessons learned during this time and thinking about the future of an organization, because we've all been forced to just completely pivot and it's been an immense change for everyone. So I guess, how do you think about kind of like blowing up the norms of hiring, of operating? Is it okay to just completely change your thinking about the future and how do you do that in such a quickly manner?
You know what? I think you have to. I think it is a business mandate. I truly believe the world has changed forever, and I think consumers have changed forever. And so I actually think you do have to rethink everything that you're doing. And in fact, we were just having a conversation a few weeks ago about a new product that we're going to be launching. And, we had been sort of on one path, and then we said, well, wait a minute. What if we blow this up and think about it digital first? Now, for a lot of folks in the audience, they might be digital first companies. We had our legacy part of our company, which is beautiful, but it's not going to get us to where we need to be. And so constantly questioning ourselves in terms of, in a digital first world, in a post-COVID world, and really every decision we make, asking those questions. Are we doing this because it's the way we always did it? Or is this the way that we think we should do it? And just by asking those questions and prompts, we've actually been able to rethink a lot of the things that we're doing. And look, during COVID, and I mean, we're still during COVID, we really said, we're going to try some things. We're going to have a test and learn mentality. And so, within our app, we tried things. We thought about, what is the need of the member right now? And how can we create things? And you know what? Maybe we'll do some great things and maybe we'll do some not so great things. But as long as we're all holding hands and learning together, I mean, we had some fun things to do. We piloted live cooking classes in our app. We'd never done that before. We piloted putting different types of content experiences in the app. And I think what we learned is that our members are hungry for that. And even now more than ever, hungrier for that connection to the community that they're part of.
And I love that you took the risk of changing your advertising from traditional to user generated, which was amazing and just goes toward the ethos of community and making this so personal.
Well, that's why I have a lot more gray hairs now, but we had just done the most beautiful photo shoot for our spring campaign in February in Los Angeles. And it was really beautiful. And we had a TV schedule planned, and it was starting in March. And we looked at it and we were like, this feels so tone deaf. Like we can't do that. And so, and look, we're very fortunate that we can, our members are, all raising their hand wanting to be in advertising.
Yep.
So we went to them and we said, like, what's the message that you feel right now is the most important. And what's interesting is, and I've never done this in my entire career, but for a 6-week flight of TV, we created 3 different ads because, we would do sort of a check-in every day in terms of where consumer sentiment was. Mm-hmm. And it was changing. It's like dog years. 1 week was like 7 years, and it just was changing so quickly. And we felt it was really important that we stay really in touch with how people are feeling. So it was an incredible experience. And what I will say is, I just think staying relevant in culture, understanding where the conversation is, consumers pick up on that, and it felt really real and authentic to them.
We only have 20 minutes today, so thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and thanks again to Gail.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
We're now going to introduce the next panel. They're going to be talking about marketing and merchandising strategies in recessionary times.
First of all, I want to thank CommerceNext for having me here. My name is Melissa Campanelli, and I'm the co-founder of the Women in Retail Leadership Circle, and I'm also the brand and content director for Total Retail. And we have a great partnership with CommerceNext, and we're so happy to be here today. And as Veronica mentioned, this panel is going to be all about marketing and merchandising in post-recessionary times. Let's face it, we are kind of having those right now. So before we get started, with some of the questions that we've talked about, I'd love to just have everybody on the panel introduce themselves. So Mike, why don't we start with you? See you there on the screen so you can kind of jump in.
Sure. My name is Mike Lackman. I'm the CEO of Trade Coffee, which is a marketplace of the country's best craft roasted coffees. We use personalization to curate subscriptions where our country's best roasters ship coffee made on demand to houses all over the country. And we've been really busy helping them access their consumers at a time when many of their shops are closed because of the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. Courtney, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. I'm Courtney Schaefer-Levold. I'm the Director of Client Success at Amarsis. Amarsis is an omni-channel customer engagement platform, and just happy to talk to you today a little bit about what we've been working on with our customers, as well as some practices we've taken on as a business just to support retail and e-commerce in a better capacity.
Perfect, great. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about some of your what you're working on with some of your customers, some of your retail customers. And Stephen, why don't you jump in?
Sure. So I'm Stephen Tristan-Young. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Poshmark, a social commerce marketplace of over 60 million shoppers and sellers. We're a community-first tech platform and have been pioneering social commerce as a new form of buying and selling online, as well as customers engaging with each other.
Perfect. Let's see. We did have another panelist that was going to join us, Siobhan from Tommy Hilfiger, and I think she's having some trouble joining. So I think I'm just going to get started, if that's okay with everybody. So the first question I wanted to talk about was consumer buying behavior. So, we all know that it's being influenced by social distancing, but is there any other type of buying behavior that you've noticed right now during the current recession that was similar to what was happening in the 2007 to 2009 recession? So can you kind of draw any comparisons there? And I think Mike, you wanted to comment there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to completely dissociate it from the social distancing because that is a big part of what's different. What we're seeing is a very different sort of compartmentalization or bifurcation in the eyes of the consumer about where they're willing to spend more money. Mm-hmm. And so even as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was some work that came out by McKinsey that suggested that in almost every category, net expectations of spend between July and August were going to be down by pretty considerable amounts. But a couple categories like home healthcare products, grocery, essentials, actually saw consumers expecting to spend more in those categories. And so I think versus a time when people psychologically wanted to save writ large, which is how we interpreted things when I was in the pet industry and the industrial supplies industry going back in the late aughts, 10 years ago or so, here it seems like you kind of have to decide, are customers trying to find a way to save money, in which case accelerating sales probably needs to be attributable to markdowns, versus are customers trying to spend more money better? And I think both of those behaviors are happening, and you kind of have to decide which customer you're catering to or which category you're selling into in that regard.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, consumers and how much money they have to spend right now.
Yeah.
Courtney, did you want to jump in there as well? Maybe some of your customers, you saw some similarities?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Mike just said, and we're seeing the exact same thing. Is it a shift of not spending or just deciding where we're going to spend money? Some of our customers in the outdoor brand space or digital experiences or home goods or DIYs, we're actually seeing record-setting numbers, right? Because the difference is we can't separate the stay at home from the state of the world, right? And so the stay at home did force a lot of the consumer behavior to figure out, well, what are we going to do if we only can go to our backyard? And we had a bike customer that had set 10-year records in the spring just of being able to sell those and outdoor camping gear. So I do think we're going to continue to see different pivots, but there are certain areas in which we saw thriving because people were spending the money that they had to be able to have this new life while they were at home.
Yes, Stephen, I see you're shaking your head in agreement. Do you have anything you want to add there?
No, especially I would say for our platform where, we focus a lot on basically items that are new with tags or gently worn resale goods. There's been a lot more of an openness to that, especially I think because one, to what the other panelists had mentioned, people are just much more mindful of spending. What we've noticed is that more people are willing to buy more items at a slightly cheaper cost than say buying on one large item, which I think speaks to sort of the need to actually spend, to sort of continue to kind of use the income you have, but do it in a really smart way. And for us, I think what trends that we normally probably would have seen as far as, okay, people buying spring goods, people buying for the summer have just kind of upended because people are buying more homeware. People are trying to recreate things in their home. We have a whole home category where people are buying lights and decoration, trying to recreate in their own backyards experiences that they would normally get elsewhere. So I think it's really fascinating that even right now, we're supposed to be in back to school, but if people aren't going back to school, what are they going to be buying, right? So traditional sort of, I would say, retail pillars are kind of being upended. And even looking at our platform where consumer first data is telling us, hey, you know what, tie-dye is going to be really big this summer. We had a huge uptick on that. And it's something that we didn't find initially interesting, but then when we start like the number of sales happening, it's like, hey, it's saying something about how consumers are behaving and what they're looking for. So it's kind of following what people are looking at versus normally what retail says is like, this is what you must want and this is what you must buy. It's really interesting to see the trends that are on our platform.
That's so interesting. So it's almost like the consumer dictating sort of the merchandising or that's really interesting. And is that something that you noticed happening in the 2007 timeframe as well?
I mean, I think it's harder back then because most of like a fashion marketplace like Poshmark at that time probably wasn't existing, right? But however, you probably saw some of that happening because TJ Maxx and Ross and Marshalls were around. But in this time, all those stores that normally would have probably benefited were all closed. So I think people still looking for the kind of products you would buy at those stores they were looking for on our platforms and other similar resale platforms.
True. So let's talk a little bit about marketing messages. I'm going to jump ahead here. Courtney, have any of your customers discussed how their marketing messages have changed when the pandemic began? And also, what I find interesting too, have they changed over the last few months? Maybe gone in a different direction?
Absolutely. I think what we clung to right at the beginning with our customers is that if we don't get comfortable that everything is going to change beyond our control, we're going to miss out, right? And so we really set down the expectation that we were planning for next week, next month, 2 months, and saying, okay, where are we right now? How do we work in what we know or what we have established? Because beyond what we were seeing in consumer behaviors, our brands were coming up with major hurdles of furlough. Are their teams the way that they used to be? So we were facing adversity that I don't think that many even could prepare for, given both of the sides of how does the consumer actually buy, but how are our teams staying intact? And so the ones that were really, I thought, doing a really nice job was when they kind of pivoted into this maybe a charitable offering or charity sentiment or going to a DIY tip, home inspiration, for cause. The content messaging, I think, took it one of its biggest turns because it was no longer really good enough to send your 2 to 3 digital touch points a day around a product when the whole world around you is changing and people are adapting. And the brands that really soften that tone and humanize themselves, I think will be able to keep their consumer connected even when they weren't buying or needing to buy something at that moment, because they were maybe a bright spot in their day or something interesting that they were looking forward to, or hey, I have that, I could redecorate my office, right? And so those were the types of conversations we were having and leading with our customers on how do we get to be really agile so that when next Tuesday something changes again, we can just pivot and respond to it. And that was what was really remarkable about the things that we got to see with the brands, as well as the ways that consumers were interacting with different types of communication.
Wow, that's super interesting. I actually just heard that I think we have Shawan on the line now. Is that correct?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I'm just if you guys don't mind, can you just briefly introduce yourself and your title, and so that folks can know who you are, and then I'll ask you a quick follow up.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Shawan Johnson. I am the Executive Vice President of Merchandising for Tommy Hilfiger company stores in North America. Happy to be with everyone today.
Cool. So we were just talking about marketing messages and how they've changed since the pandemic began, and even over the past few months. And Courtney had some great comments around that. Can you talk a little bit about how your marketing messages may have changed?
Yeah, absolutely. When our stores closed back in March, we had to quickly pivot the messaging to highlight our online offer, and we really focused even on those customers in our database who historically had only shopped with us in our physical locations. It was about really enticing them to shift to online. From a product messaging standpoint, we really focused on what I call, the 3 C's. Care. Customers really wanted to take care of themselves and their families, and it was really important for us to message how we were going to do that when they entered in our stores. From a product perspective, the other C is really about comfort. I think this was noted before, but our team focused on highlighting products that amplify comfort, versatility. People were working from home, juggling, teaching their children, and we really wanted to make sure that we highlighted those products that would fit their needs, and for those that also just wanted to lounge on the couch and watch Netflix. And then the last C really is about connection. With all the macro uncertainty, it is important for us to communicate directly to our database and our consumers about what is happening out there in the world, and to also make a stance on what we believe as a company in terms of the values that we have, and ensure that our customers understood that.
Cool. Yeah, interesting. I had heard about the comfort being a big topic. I remember where I heard the term stretch became really popular right now. Stretch, either stretch in fabric or stretch type clothing. Okay, so moving on, and Stephen, maybe you can kind of chime in on this a little bit. And Joanne just spoke about merchandising. Have you noticed that there's any different products that you had planned for pre-COVID, and are you focusing on different ones now?
Sure. So we approach this kind of in 2 ways, right? I do think that one, we actually were merchandising a lot more of our seller tools, meaning, our platform is fundamentally about how can people make money off of the goods that they have. And so we really thought through how do we, accelerate maybe some of the tools or highlight some of the tools that help people sell online, whether it's the way that they can feature their products, how to photograph their products. We actually launched a feature called Posh Stories, which is a video selling tool to allow people to actually make their merchandise come to life in a 3D way. But separate from the external merchandising, I will say to what I had said earlier, we were looking at the trends that users themselves were kind of telling us. So I think even before loungewear was kind of becoming big, we actually saw a lot of that, and we're featuring the items on the platform that people were selling, and really trying to think through also, and I will say this, how to be mindful of time when probably, at some point we normally would do festival wear merchandising, and the fact that all that had just suddenly changed, really it was like, oh wait, hold on, let's think through all of the merchandising strategy that we normally would apply, but now may not actually work. But how can we put a twist on it? And whether or not do you want to do, Coachella yourself from home? How do you still kind of try to be smart and market those experiences? Because I do think there's an element that people want this, but maybe, how do you capitalize on that emotional attachment? Because I do think that there is that element that happens out there.
Yes, totally. Let's see. And by the way, I just wanted to let folks know that if they have a question, please send it in the text box. So we're happy to answer them. So let's talk a little bit about retention and acquisition. Those are such hot topics around whenever you think about marketing, that's what you think of. Have you noticed that there's been a shift in your budgeting towards retention versus acquisition? I'd love to get that perspective. Mike, maybe you can jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we're pretty sensitive to because it's practically impossible to make acquisition costs back on a single bag of coffee, and we sell coffee one bag at a time. And so if we're not in it for retention, we're really not in it to make money. I think that one of the things that we dabbled with, like we experimented with the 5-pound bag of coffee because it was something that our roasters were good at selling because they sell it in their wholesale business, and then we knew there were a lot of consumers stocking up in March and April. And in the heat of everything, the judgment we made was actually not to try to whip up a very different revenue or life cycle stream just because the lifetime value implications would be so unpredictable. And we put more energy into merchandising the things that did have a grounding in lifetime value that we could predict and nurture through our normal retention marketing. Even as small a business as we are, that was just too unpredictable for us to spend ad dollars against at a time when everything was so volatile. So I think one of the takeaways from the last 90 to 120 days has been to take the tried and true retention drivers and adapt them to what's going on versus throwing completely new stuff at the wall. Just because I think, at least having been in a couple retention businesses now, retention-driven businesses, I should say, the read you get on the first 90 or 120 days of revenue can be really misleading. And if you start to spend money out 1 year, 2 year LTVs, extrapolating on what you learn in a 45 or a 60 or a 90-day stretch in times like these, that can be really scary. So I think what proved out was we probably left a little bit of revenue on the table where we weren't putting like 10 pounds of coffee in people's basements in giant numbers, but we did have an opportunity to create relationships with customers that were interested in making coffee at home differently now that their lifestyles have changed. And it's seeming so far that those investments have been pretty solid.
Interesting. Courtney, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, don't go. I go to Stephen next. We saw a huge surplus in first-time buyers among our customer base from a whole, especially for those that were more majority sold in your big box, whether it be Target or Walmart or Nordstrom. And so what we worked with brands on is they had this opportunity for an individual to get to know them. For instance, Native Shoes and Black, they've sold majority through brick and mortar for many, many years and done very well. They were getting first-time buyers coming through the door that they had never met before. And we used it as an opportunity that through this time to get to know who their buyer was in a way that they didn't have that opportunity, and then be able to personalize the experience around that. Maybe this individual's only bought this one face cream the whole time. How do we introduce them to the plethora of brand properties? Or how do we introduce the Native Shoes, who is a children's brand in most people's mind, that they actually have women's and men's shoes? And so we just tried to lean in and use our team support to help supplement other groups within their orgs to say, let's take this as an opportunity and a gift and get to know the consumer that we haven't necessarily been able to meet directly before. And we saw a lot of pivot in how do we get to that second, third, fourth purchase. And not just that, but how do we then introduce her to buying and all the benefits of the brand directly versus what they may have only known through a third party before?
Stephen, do you want to just join into that one? And I actually think this is our last time for our last question, unfortunately. So Stephen, do you want to add some?
Sure. So I think similar to what Mike had said, retention obviously is an incredibly important vehicle right now, I think, for a lot of brands, especially because kind of rediscovering and sort of bringing back your old users who may have not engaged in the past, especially when things have changed, makes more sense because you have a lot more information on them to sort of serve up the right kind of merchandise or even products. I will say that one thing that's been really challenging, and I think it's across the board for many companies, is to think through what is the value of a new customer, right? Like someone you're acquiring right now, even the data you're getting is just so, I would say, specious, because everyone is acting so different that even just looking at the models you have and kind of redefining those models and saying, hey, whatever our old user acquisition models might be, you almost have to put aside and kind of rethink because the landscape has completely changed. And really saying, is 6 weeks of data enough to predict what you want to get in the future, or do you need longer? Or do you want to even say, hey, this is just a one-time experience that you might need to even redo it again as we move forward into the year? I think that's happened a lot, just because all the auction ecosystems have also changed and are still changing, that it's almost moving targets on a constant basis. But what you can count on is your existing customers to come back and really giving them the value, because that I think is where there's always a better investment in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great way to end it as well. Value is so important, especially nowadays.
Please tune in. We'll be back at 3:15. We have some amazing sessions, including panels with Rothy's and Tim's and hers and Showfields, and then a keynote with Roan. So we hope you tune back in at 3:15 and join us for the part 2 of today in the live summit. Thanks so much, and take care, everyone.